In looking back at my 50 years in foreign affairs, the title of my memoir would probably be From the Mississippi to the Mekong, because it all began on a Saturday afternoon in the fall of 1964 when I got in my 1955 two-tone green Mercury, drove across the North Bridge in Dubuque into southern Wisconsin, and headed to Madison, where I was going to take the Foreign Service exam about potentially becoming a Foreign Service officer. I should point out that being a diplomat really wasn't my first choice. I wanted to be a lawyer. I had watched Perry Mason TV shows, and I could see myself in the courtroom and arguing cases and solving crimes. But having grown up in very modest circumstances, I didn't have enough money to take the law boards. And so the Foreign Service exam was free, and I thought I could give it a shot, and who knows what would happen. It was a long shot, but as I drove towards Madison, it wasn't the Mississippi or the Mekong I was thinking about. It was more the Thames in London, the Seine in Paris, the Danube in Vienna, because I thought that's what diplomats did. I'd be going to Europe, and I had these visions of diplomatic sugar plums dancing in my head. Well, I took the test. It's 3 or 4 hours long, continued on to Milwaukee, where I was in graduate school at Marquette University, and sort of forgot about it until that day when the envelope arrived, my test scores in it, and I had passed. Now, my first thought was, kids from Dubuque who went to Wahlert High School and Loras College don't get in the Foreign Service. That's for people from Princeton and Harvard and Yale. And I thought, well, maybe they got my scores mixed up with one of those guys. But I wasn't going to complain, and the next step was to take an oral interview. So there are about 18,000 people take the written exam each year, maybe 1,000 pass, and the oral interview, several hour long across the table from 3 veteran Foreign Service officers grilling you about everything, would be the next step, and that would get it down to about 200. So I thought it's still a long shot, but I went on to the University of Maryland in College Park, scheduled the oral interview in Washington, D.C. in the spring of 1966, went there, and once again, lightning struck. I had a great interview, and at the end, they walked back in and sat down, and with sort of blank looks on their faces, I was prepared for the worst, told me I had passed. Wow, I was going to become an American diplomat. I was going to be going off to one of those fancy embassies and going to diplomatic parties and soirees in the salons of Europe. And I'd be sipping aperitifs while talking about the nuances of international developments with other diplomats. At least that's what I thought diplomats did. And so there was a background and security check. The FBI showed up in Dubuque to interview my family, my neighbors, individuals I went to school with. And then when I got past that, the last test, the last element was a medical exam. And I thought, this is the easiest. This is, I'm going to get through. I'm going to make this. Nothing wrong with me. Hadn't had any medical problems. And I went, the doctor examined me, and then the State Department called me and said, there's a problem. I went in to see the doctor, and they explained that they had found albumin in my urine, and that this was a potential problem, and they just needed to clear it up. And so they sent me to the leading specialist in America, the top urologist at Georgetown University in Washington, D.C., who put me through weeks and then months of tests. I was in and out of hospitals. I was getting barium injections so they could x-ray my body and my renal system. I was collecting all sorts of specimens and bringing them with me, driving from College Park, Maryland, where I was in a PhD program at the University of Maryland, to Georgetown Hospital in rush hour to deliver these specimens there. On the last day of this process, I had to lay in bed all night, get up in the morning, and go out and run for a half hour, come back in, each time collecting another specimen. I had to stand in what was called the exaggerated lardontic position, with my shoulders against the wall and my back bowed up for another half an hour, collecting more specimens, driving to Georgetown to deliver them, and then awaiting the verdict. Finally, a letter came, and the doctor wrote that after examining me, that I had something called orthostatic proteinuria. As he explained it, there's a little gate in your kidneys that's supposed to keep protein in your body, not let it escape, and that my gate would stick open. And it was a functional problem, not anything that was going to keep me out of the military, but, and he used this phrase, it could be a harbinger of future problems. And with that, the State Department excluded me and said that with this problem, they needed individuals who were completely clear to serve abroad, and that since I wasn't, and they couldn't be sure I was 100% healthy, that my application would be on hold. And they told me that this would be a matter that if I could get it resolved, I could still get in because my scores were good for 2 years. And so, as I walked out the State Department that day, I thought my dream of a diplomatic career, this long shot that had looked like it had come through and was going to happen, my life was going to be changed, suddenly appeared to be over. It would lead to a very interesting next step in the process of going from the Mississippi to the Mekong.